Hey, closet busters and bold move makers. It is time once again for Life Uncloseted. So I want you to gather around because it is time once again to kick down those closet doors of your life. We're here to escape our BS, explore our fears, and elevate our self-expression. I'm your host, Rick Clemens. I'm the bold move expert and that coming out guy who's going to take you to the party, the pulpit, the wake, and back to the party of living your life uncloseted. So come on along with me and grab hold of yourself and get ready to step out, step up, and step into facing your fears, making your bold moves, and living life without apologies. Now let's get to the show. Hey, closet dwellers and bold move makers. It's time once again for Life Uncloseted. And today we are going to bust through some doors of some stuff that sometimes isn't really easy to talk about, but it needs to be. And you guys have heard me talk about my own battles with depression. Talked to some people about suicide attempts. I have gone through some of this in my own life with friends and stuff. And I just want to say, I want you to just step into a space where you imagine yourself in this place of deep depression and you know that suicide runs in your family. You probably contemplate suicide almost as often as you change your underwear. And then I want you to imagine that you find a way to move through life by using humor to inspire hope and laughter to save your own life and to save the life of others. And that's who we're bringing to our conversation today. He's a fellow speaker, friend of mine. His name is Frank King, and he speaks on suicide prevention, and he's a trainer on all of that as well. And he brings the funny part of this from being a writer on The Tonight Show for 20 years, but he also brings that really personal space of suffering with depressive disorder and chronic suicidability. And I just want to say this is a subject that I wish we would talk about more, and this is why I wanted to bring Frank onto the show. And thank you, Kelly Jakes, for introducing us. Kelly was on the podcast not long ago with another fellow speaker, and I love that we are having this conversation today. So, Frank, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, and you know what, Rick? You know this, but the listeners don't know this yet. I am literally in the closet, and
I know.
I'm not gay. Not there's anything wrong with that, as Seinfeld would say. But
yeah.
We were talking because I was trying to record, I'm voicing an audio book, and I was trying to record it in my living room, and the sound was bouncing here and there, and somebody suggested your closet. So I don't know if you've ever had a guest who was actually in the closet on your out of the closet show.
I have interviewed a few people who have been sitting in their closets, most of them literally surrounded by clothes. And folks, if you ever want to start a podcast, that is actually the perfect place to start recording podcasts, is in the closet, because your clothes muffle the sound, gives you a really rich sound quality, and almost like being in a studio. So yeah, thanks for sharing that, man. And thanks for coming out of the closet or being in the closet with me for this show, because as you and I were talking before we jumped on here, this is really something that needs to be talked about. In fact, you brought forward a statistic of, what was the number again, of how many people attempt suicide or succeed?
It's 47,000 people a year, works out to about one every 12 minutes in the U.S.
That's just such a shocking number to me. And being somebody who myself has suffered with depression, and I've only thought about suicide once, I can't say just once, but only thought about really taking that step one time, and that was literally when I came out of the closet. And I was driving home, and people who've listened to this know this story a little bit, but we'll repeat it real quick before we dive into your story. I was driving from the airport. I had just landed in Los Angeles. I had flown from London to Los Angeles, knowing that I was about to go come out to my wife. And there were about 4 opportunities on that freeway where I looked in the rearview mirror and saw semi-trucks right in the lane next to me. And I thought, man, it could be so easy to just turn that wheel and nobody would ever know the difference. And so been there, but this is something that you have really turned into your life work. So let's talk about where this all started for you, man.
Well, I've been doing stand-up comedy since day after Christmas 1985. My lovely wife and my girlfriend and I went on the road. This is kind of the beginning of the comedy boom.
Yep.
We're on the road for 2,629 nights in a row, nonstop.
Wow.
No home. And I always wanted to make a living, which I did at stand-up comedy, but I also wanted to make a difference. I just could never figure out what I had to tell or teach anybody. I didn't really have any learning objectives or outcomes or, takeaways. And with the recession,
Yep.
2008, 9, and 10, the speaking business for me dropped off about 80%.
Yep.
My wife and I lost everything in a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. And I came close enough to ending my life that I can tell you what the barrel of my gun tastes like. Spoiler alert, didn't pull the trigger. I tell that story in my keynote. I told it 2 weeks ago in Philadelphia, and a friend of mine was in the audience. He'd never heard me say that. So he comes up afterwards, and he goes, "Hey, man, how come you didn't pull the trigger?" I go, "Hey, man, could you try to sound a little less disappointed?"
Exactly.
So didn't pull the trigger. I turned out my life insurance policy. A lot of people don't know this, but life insurance policies often have a 2-year suicide clause.
Yep.
You kill yourself in the first 24 months, they just give your premiums back. If you wait till 24 months and a day, then my wife would have gotten $1 million. And I refused to leave my wife both brokenhearted and destitute. So when I realized I only had the policy 22 months, I had 2 months to wait before I could kill myself.
Wow.
And in an ironic twist, and I've heard other people who have chronic suicidality say this, because I knew that at 2 months and a day, I could check out. That helped me stay alive for those 2 months, knowing I was sitting in the window seat in the exit row, and that at 2 months and a day, I could complete the suicide. So in a strange way, my chronic suicidality has kept me alive.
Very interesting. You know, I interviewed a friend of mine. It's been in the last year. He's a young guy. I think he's in his early 30s now, but when he was, I'm going to get the age wrong, but I think he was around 26, probably 26, 27. He had just gone through a divorce. He was losing a business and he wasn't really happy. He wasn't in great shape, but he wasn't like, overly obese and everything. And very similar to what you said, he gave himself 6 months and he's like, I'm going to do this in 6 months, but between now and 6 months, I'm going to go do everything I want to do that I said I'm going to do. And the amazing thing is, again, he's still here. It became his life work because now his company is called The Bucket List Life, and he helps people go live their bucket lists. And because he went and lived his, he ran with the bulls, he hiked Machu Picchu. Yeah, I mean, I can't even remember everything that he did in that 6 months time. But he said, it's really interesting. The thing that I most wanted to do when I started doing my bucket list, it was my bucket list that kept me alive. And now is the reason I'm here. So really
well, and I did a TEDx talk called Suicide, the Secret of My Success, Dead Man Talking.
Right.
And yeah, and by the way, that when I sent that in and they called me the next day, you're on.
Wow.
Well, and what it is, again, I was married to a lovely woman, but miserable. Selling insurance, great business, miserable. I was not going to open mic nights. This is in the early 80s. And I really believed that I was born to be a comedian. And so the thought occurred to me, I was going to kill myself. And that was a very empowering thought because I realized, wait a minute, I could divorce my wife, quit my job, try stand-up comedy. If it works, which I think it will, great. If it doesn't, hell, I can still kill myself. So that's what I did. And the difference between me and a neuronormal or neurotypical person, let's say I had a twin brother, same situation. Unhappily married, job, didn't like it, thought he should be doing comedy, but was neuronormal, not depressed or suicidal.
Right.
Come to the same juncture, I could do stand-up comedy, but if it doesn't work, oh God, I would lose everything. Well, I had nothing to lose.
Right.
And I've bumped into a number of people, entrepreneurs and other entertainers, who have the very same thought process. That's why they're doing what they're doing today, is because they thought, well, if I keep doing this, I'm going to kill myself. I might as well give it a shot.
Yep. In fact, my friend I was just talking about, his thing that kept him moving forward was when he finally said to himself, what if this is the worst it ever got? What if this is my worst? And that was when things started to move, because he's like, I can't go any lower. It's not going to get any worse. And that was when the inspiration came for him. So for our listeners, I want to kind of just explore this because I know what it means. But this depressive disorder, I would not classify myself there, but I do take my meds daily to just like keep me balanced. And I'm very fortunate because I'm on a very low dosage of this stuff. But let's talk about the chronic suicidality. Let's really explain that to the listeners, because I know it's basically you just have chronic thoughts of suicide on pretty regular basis, right?
Yes, it's And when I speak, Rick, I think almost every time I've spoken, somebody has come up afterwards who has it.
Yeah.
Didn't know it had a name, just thought there was some kind of freak.
Yeah.
And what it is the way I explained in my first TED Talk when I came out as depressed and suicidal, which nobody knew, not even my wife.
Right.
I explained it this way. A couple of years, suicide, the idea of suicide is always on the menu as a solution for problems large and small. When I say small, a couple of years ago, my car broke down. I had 3 thoughts, unbidden. 1, get it fixed. 2, buy new. And 3, I could just kill myself. And that's chronic suicidality. I find myself sitting at a railroad crossing. You know, the arms are coming down, the lights are flashing. I look over the train and think, wonder how hard I'd have to hit that crossing bar to go through that one and not through the other one. So I end up on the tracks, not on the other side.
All right.
It's I've had that so long. It really is nothing more for me than a math problem.
Right. It's just a thought. I mean, it's like, a lot of times when you're doing this work about, any kind of personal development work, there's always that, okay, well, let's just watch our thoughts. Let's just watch them come through and then they go past and they come through and they go past. And I've had another friend who is in this same space. It's like they've gotten to the point where they know that thought's there. They see it. They recognize it. They're very mindful of it. And then it just moves on. But it isn't like, okay, let's really do the follow through. So what keeps you, or in general, but I'm going to say in you, from doing the follow through at this stage?
Well, and that's going to be part of what I do in my next TED Talk, if I ever get another one. Normally, if somebody's depressed, the protocol is you ask them, are you depressed? Yes. Right. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Yes. Do you have a plan? Well, I have chronic suicidality. I got a half dozen plans. Which one do you want to hear?
Right, exactly.
The next question should be, I believe, well, are you going to kill yourself? And my answer would be no. Why would I kill myself? I think if that were the next question and people could answer it honestly without worrying about, a 5150, as they say in California, being locked down for 3 days, then more people would come forward with those thoughts. And then the next question, I believe, the last one, and I think it's important, if I say I'm not going to kill myself, you should ask, okay, well, then tell me why not. So you end on a positive note. And here's my why not, Rick. I realized this back in January. I was in Billings, Montana. I had just spoken at the University of Montana Billings. I'm standing outside waiting for the young man to come back with his pickup to take me to the hotel. It's snowing. It's dark. There's a street light a little ways away, so it's not fully dark.
Right.
Snow's coming down, and I'm thinking about those people who come up after my keynote and the relief they feel to find out they're not alone. It has a name. They're not freaks. And I think what I've done is I've taken them just far enough off course, the course to suicide, that perhaps they'll live a full life. So I'm thinking about these people. It's snowing. It's dark. And I thought, oh, dear God, I am George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life. I've been shown what people's lives would be like if they didn't hear me speak and never realized they were not alone. And so and my next thought was, oh, I can't kill myself because I would take all those people with me.
Yep.
And then the comic in me said, next line, they would probably pursue me through eternity. You couldn't wait a week.
Oh, but it's so true.
That's what keeps me alive. And I've heard other people say, if it weren't for my chronic suicidality, the option,
right,
I would have killed myself a long time ago. But I know, it's once you cross that barrier and you're willing to do it, then it's
right.
But again, like I said, I can't do it now because I would be doing a disservice to everybody who will hear me speak in the future and perhaps, take them off that course, that path to suicide.
It's interesting you bring that up, Frank, because people have asked me over the years. So originally this was the Coming Out Lounge. This is what this podcast was entitled. And then we made it into Life Uncloseted. And people said, why did you do this? And I said, because I got to a point where I love supporting my community, but it isn't just about them. And if I had ended the Coming Out Lounge, I would have done a disservice to a whole lot of people. Instead, what I chose to do was open the doors even wider and invite more people in to tell their coming out stories so that everybody can see we're all not that different. It may be a sexuality thing. It may be a suicide thing. It may be a depression thing. It may be I'm going to leave my corporate job, whatever it is. But these coming out stories are all the same thing. And I feel like if I had not continued it, similar to what you said, my thought was pretty much if I don't continue this in some way, and it wasn't coming from ego, if I don't continue this in some way, there's going to be a whole lot of people, even if it's only a few hundred people a year, that they need to hear these stories so that they can move forward. And that's why I didn't quit. And
well, my
big thing for us to do.
My co-host on our new podcast, by the way, called the Suicide Prevention Punchline, is she's a comic and a TED talker, and her second TED talk was on coming out. How do you come out to your friends and family as depressed, which has one stigma?
Yep.
And suicidal, another stigma.
Yep.
She would tell you, and we've joked about it, that it would have been easier for her to come out as gay. Because, that's, Mom, Dad, I got something to tell you. It's very important. I'm depressed and suicidal. Oh, my God, I was hoping you were going to be gay. Because most people can wrap their mind around that. Right. Wrapping your mind around why someone would want to end their life, and between you and me, and I'm sure you know this, it's not about ending your life, it's about ending the pain.
Absolutely.
So, and I describe my TED Talk when I was 52 as coming out. I came out as depressed and suicidal because nobody knew. So, by the way, just a sidebar, both my folks were gay, my mom and my dad.
Interesting.
They met in the high school in the late 30s in North Carolina. North Carolina today is not the place you want to come screaming out of the closet. Right. Because you have to figure out which bathroom you're going to use.
Right, exactly.
So, but they were crazy about one another, and they both wanted to start a family.
Yep.
So they got married, and they tried to adopt, but back then there weren't that many babies up for adoption. And so they did the old-fashioned way, and my mother got pregnant, carried to term, 9 months, and it passed away very shortly after birth. I waited a year or so, got pregnant again, carried it to term. It passed away shortly after birth. And where she found the courage to try a third time, I have no, I'm not a woman. I don't know where you find, and a fourth time, my sister is 18 months younger than I.
Wow.
And so when somebody says to me that lesbians are not qualified to birth and raise children, my advice to them at that point, you need to back out of the range of my right hook.
Right, exactly.
Because she is the most courageous person I ever knew. I don't know where you find, people gave my father a hard time when she got pregnant the third time. Why did you do that? And he said, look, Dixie, it wasn't my call. So,
but I also think that that's probably what gave you the courage. I always look back at where does this courage stuff come from? And whether it's in our DNA or it's our social upbringing, however we're socialized, I always look at where the person is. And as you were talking through that, Frank, it hit me that that's probably a lot of where you got the foundation to say, I am going to talk about this stuff. I am going to have conversations. I'm not going to let this be the hidden dirty secret any longer, because somewhere along the way, your mom showed you the courage of what it takes to just say, this is what we do. And we just keep going.
Well, and it's also, Rick, another reason that I don't end my life, because my mother worked so hard to bring me here. I cannot dishonor that effort, that courage by ending it early. That makes sense.
It makes total sense. It makes total sense. So as this moves forward and you continue to move through your life, you've explained, why you don't do it and all this stuff. And I love these questions because I have dealt with a few clients in my work as a coming out coach. I will ask some of those questions like, so if you did, how would you do it? Because that's my signal of I'm in some territory that I'm not trained for, but I know enough to okay, let's ask that question so that I can say, I really think it's important for you to talk to a therapist at this point. I will support you as I coach the best I can, but we need to get you some more help that can really help you there. And of course I have all the numbers for suicide prevention and everything is, in all my Rolodexes, all that stuff ready to go in case somebody goes there. I'm curious though, why do you think and I'm making an assumption, but I think my assumption's pretty solid here. Why do you think this is such a hidden epidemic for men?
Oh, Lord. Yeah, it is an epidemic. 8 out of 10 suicides in the U.S. are white males age 45, 54.
Wow.
Yeah, and there are a number of reasons. The one is it's the jobs people think the manufacturing jobs went overseas.
Right.
Only 12 to 15% went overseas. The other 85, 88% have
Right.
gone to robots and AI, automation. And think about that. That's a lot of jobs that somebody, blue collar, maybe a union gig, good wages, allow them to climb into the middle class.
Right.
And the job disappears.
Yep.
And, men's egos are often tied to their employment.
Absolutely.
And secondly, men, and if I recorded on our website for the book we wrote, Guts, Grit, and Grind, I recorded the foreword by a gentleman who invented something called QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer. It's training in spotting depression, thoughts of suicide, and what to do, what to say. He says he works with men who are suicidal.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of therapists don't want to work with someone who's suicidal, men who are suicidal, because they're afraid the family will sue if the man completes.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, in his experience, men wait too long to address, say, a lump in their testicle, or to get a PSA test or colonoscopy, or they rationalize chest pains away.
Right.
Because they're men. They're, big boys don't cry.
Exactly.
So they don't reach out. And that's a big part of the problem, is rather than reach out, they reach for the bottle, they reach for some kind of drug and spiral downward. If you're 50 years old, you've been working in a manufacturing plant your entire working life, and all of a sudden you're adrift, can't support your family. There's a lot of pride that that goes with that.
Yep.
And so that's why the book, it's called Guts, Grit, and the Grind, a men's mental fitness manual.
Yep.
The idea was, the author, Sarah Gare, one of my co-authors, went to the bookstore to find a book on men's mental health and couldn't find it. Thought, well, there's a vacuum.
Yep.
So so what we know is men take advice from other men. My wife will tell you, she could give me a Nobel Prize winning idea and I would poo-poo it. But if the mailman told me the same thing, I'm on my way to Oslo to get pick up the hardware.
Absolutely.
So we have 42 stories in the book, 2 of which are mine, of men with a wide variety of issues: bankruptcy, alcoholism, gambling addiction, whatever.
Yep.
500 words are things are good. The middle 500 words are things went to hell in a handbasket. And the last 500 words, here's how I am coping, in hopes that men would see how another man was coping with the same problem and be willing to take that advice. Plus, the book is chock full of, like you said, resources, phone numbers, clinical advice, things you can do in all of these situations. Now, the way the book came about was I got a call from the 2 women, Dr. Sally Spencer-Thomas, psychologist, and Sarah Gare, suicide prevention trainer.
Yep.
And they said, we'd like you to make the book funny. Would you do that? And I said, wait a minute. You 2 ladies are writing a book on men's mental fitness. Don't you think you might need, I don't know, a man? They go, oh my God. I said, I'll do it on 2 conditions. I'll make it funny, and it's full of automobile metaphors, Rick. We make it look like an automobile owner's manual, so a guy might pick it up. Or if another guy sees him, you won't think he's reading a self-help book.
Right, exactly.
And it's all full of automobile metaphors like, don't you wish you had a check engine light on your brain? So you go in, and the mental mechanic goes, Bob, yeah, no wonder you're depressed. You're a quart low on serotonin.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I said, I'll do it on two conditions. 1, I'm a co-author, which I am. Yeah. And 2, I want to voice the book for Audible. So that was the deal. And
that's awesome, man.
Yeah. I don't know if you know this, in Australia, they have something called the shed movement. In Australia, a shed is a garage. Okay. And it's well known that men will share with other men real feelings if they're not sitting across from one another at Starbucks looking each other in the eye. If they're both underneath the hood of a car, or they're both in a boat facing opposite directions fishing, then they
Interesting.
have much more unguarded conversations if they're doing something. So in Australia, they have the shed movement, which is they take guys who like to work on cars, they put a couple of them in a garage with a car, and they talk, or they like woodworking, or they like
Mhm.
metalworking, or they like things that you would normally do in a garage.
Absolutely.
And then they can have actual conversations about things that matter because they're not, gazing into each other's eyes at Starbucks.
Interesting. And I've seen that done in the work that I do, because I have another podcast, which after this conversation, I think I'm going to be asking you back to be on that podcast. It's for guys 40 years and over. But what's interesting is I do this work with men, and I've noticed this in circles, and I've always done a lot of men's work. I'm like, no, don't put us in don't do the circle thing, because as soon as we get in a circle,
oh God,
there's all these things that starts to happen for us guys. First, there can be shame. Second, there can be, oh my God, I'm back on the playground, and if I'm feeling like I'm going to get bullied or I'm not man enough, that shit starts to show up. So what I do instead is I get people in a circle, but I have them face outward.
Oh yeah.
And
Brilliant.
It's really interesting, because we'll start in the circle like, hey, just tell us your name or whatever. And I'm like, okay, now let's get a little closer. And now let's tell everybody something that you really enjoy doing. And now let's step in a little bit closer, and let's talk about the thing you most like to do in your life. So as soon as we get to that one, we start like, oh, wait. Now we're starting to get a little bit open. But they'll still answer that question. And then I'll have them pivot for the next question. And the next question is always, share out loud something that scares the shit out of you.
Yeah.
But because I have them pivot away, it's kind of interesting, because at first it's a little bit slow, but then once the first guy goes, it kind of happens. But if I have had them facing each other, it is like pulling freaking teeth, because I can't let anybody, the whole macho man sort of stuff starts to show up. But it's that interesting little pivot away, so you're not looking at each other, that opens the doorway. And of course, then from there, once we do a couple of rounds of this really intimate stuff, then we pivot back in and face each other and really say, thank you for sharing that. You find somebody in the group, I pick a guy and say, find the person in the group that said something that really touched you, and look them in the eye and just thank them. That's all you have to do. Just look them in the eye and say, thank you for sharing what you shared. And that's when the floodgates start to open up. It's just amazing stuff to see.
Well, and we're hoping the same thing will happen with the book. If you've got an alcohol problem and you read the story of the guy who comes out, tells the world in a book, that I have by name, I have this problem, then we're hoping that will help bring down those walls. And again, white males, especially 45, 54, are an endangered species at this point.
Yep.
As are, by the way,
for so many reasons, but Yeah.
But also teenagers. The suicide rate among teenagers has doubled since 2012. We're actually working on it's essentially smartphone addiction. It's we have a fancy name for it, but it's the 2012. It's doubled since 2012. And the thing that happened in 2012 that may be coincidence, maybe causality. Is that's the point at which more than 50% of the people in the United States owned a smartphone. Wow. So is it causality? Is it a correlation? Is it a coincidence? But also, in addition to the suicide rate, the reported rate among teenagers for major depressive disorder has spiked. Same with anxiety. So we think it's tied to the screen time, the cell phone. Plus, then you get the element of bullying on Facebook. And
Absolutely.
All that stuff. So anyway, that's our next question.
Very interesting, and I think it's something I observed today at the gym, and I didn't realize we would actually have this conversation. But I have my phone at the gym because I work with a distance trainer. So what I do is I look at the exercises he gives me each day, and so I'm on my phone a lot at the gym. But I'm not on my phone like talking to people. I'm like looking at the exercises, logging how much weight I did and everything. And a friend of mine was there this morning, and he comes up to me and says hi. And, we had a quick little casual conversation. And then he came over and he goes, you get a lot more done if you weren't on your phone. I said, I'm on my phone because of this. And so we had this whole conversation. He goes, wow, I made an assumption there. He goes, because so many guys here at the gym, they have their phones. I'm like, really? And so I, of course, immediately started kind of watching, the gym and looking at the guys going, of course, being a gay guy, I'm always a little leery to be doing that. It's like, okay, I don't want him to think I'm checking you out. But there were more guys in the gym on their phones than there were gals in the gym on their phone.
Oh, man.
It was really interesting. So anyway, it just kind of ties to this. So the book is out. It came out in August, and all this good stuff is going to be happening, we hope, with it. What would be the thing that you would hope most for the book to do? Besides a bestseller, but what would you really like to see the book do?
Save lives, bottom line.
Okay. Yeah.
Men, give men the opportunity to see how other men are handling whatever it is their particular issue is. What we think is going to happen, Rick, is men will buy the book, I believe. Some.
Yeah.
I believe more women will buy the book for a man in their life.
I agree.
We did some research in the beginning to see what men thought their top 5 problems are in life. Mm-hmm. And then we asked women what they thought men's top 5 problems were. And the men's list resembled the women's list. Women put money at the top, number 1. Men put it on the list, but closer to number 5. Mm. And then we asked men, what kind of help would you want from someone, a woman or other? And they made a list of things and asked the women, what kind of help do you think men want and need from their partner? And they made a list, and the 2 were completely different.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was like, we need to get this book. We need to get it done now.
Exactly. I can't wait to see this and read it because of the work I do. I'm always looking at this stuff too. It's like, okay, what is it that guys are struggling with? And I can tell you from my other podcast, 40 Plus Real Men, Real Talk, the thing that I find, money obviously shows up really quickly, which is usually tied to career. They're not happy in their career. Relationships shows up pretty dang high on that list too, whether it's relationships because they're married or with a girlfriend or a boy, husband or whatever. But in general, relationships, like I have a hard time being in relationship. I struggle with it, even though you may look at the guy and go, oh yeah, he looks like he's got, man, so many guys even struggle with the friendship thing. One that I was a little surprised at so far, just in the guys that I've been having on the podcast, one that I was really surprised at was this sense of I'm not, and I hate to use the word purpose, but I'm going to, I don't feel like I'm doing what I'm here to do. And it has nothing to do with career. It's more, I don't know that I'm living my life the way I'm meant to be living it. And I always thought that, but I was surprised when I started hearing guys say that. So, but yeah, I will definitely get the book, and I can't wait to share it, and definitely would love to have you come back on that other podcast.
And I have 2 stories in there. There is one. In my first marriage, I was not faithful, and so the story in the book is it's anonymous. The author is anonymous, and I didn't do it because I'm forthright about it was a huge mistake on my part. I should have just gotten divorced when I realized that was going to happen, and it would have been that would have been the thing to do.
Yep.
But I don't want to blow back on my ex-wife. Sure. How could you not know he was doing that? Why would you stay with a guy like that?
Yeah.
That one is anonymous. So.
Yeah. Here's something interesting that I found, and I think you'll find this interesting too. So, I think you're spot on. I think a lot of women will buy this book for guys they know. And my book, Frankly, My Dear, I'm Gay. I have more women send me. In fact, I just got an email from somebody 2 days ago who want to give this book to either somebody they know, a brother, an uncle, a friend, every once in a while, a husband. And it's so interesting because I never get those from guys. I get guys who say, hey, I bought your book. But I get more women saying, I'd really like to share your book with such and so, but I just don't know if I should. And I almost always say, no, I don't think you should, because coming out is a very personal journey. And, you're kind of pointing a loaded gun. If you accidentally misfire, you may lose a really good friendship. But I get it. It's very interesting. And then, of course, if we go back to, I'm going to say something that I don't like the term, but if you go back to the old days of everybody's got a fag hag, it's like, no wonder. There's always a good girlfriend who has a gay friend who they're just like totally into. And I find it really interesting that that's how my book gets into some hands, because some women are like, I had one woman order like 3 copies, and she literally went to friends' houses, while they were at work and left the book on the front porch.
Oh.
I'm like, I hope you wore gloves when you did that. But so anyway, but I love this conversation, Frank. I'm so glad we got connected. If you could leave somebody with some advice before we wrap it up, humorous or however you want to do it, Frank's way, who may be really struggling with this depression or the chronic suicidality, what would you love to leave them with?
Two things. One, for neuronormal people who often ask me when they have a friend or loved one who's struggling, what do I say? And I say, don't say anything, just listen. And the second thing is, and I say this in my keynote, if you are suicidal, please call the Suicide Prevention Lifeline or text, connect to 741-741. If you are just having a really awful day, call somebody crazy. And I give out my phone number in all my keynotes because I tell them, look, here's the deal. If you call me and you're just having a really awful day, I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to, as they say, should all over you. You should do this and you should do that and you should try fish oil.
Right.
I'm just going to, as a friend of mine who's double diagnosed with alcoholism and depression, I'm just going to co-sign your bullshit. I'm just going to listen and go, oh, dear God, oh, cry. How could you possibly survive that? So, it's seek out. I meet once a week on Mondays with, I call it my crazy coffee clutch, with 3 or 4 friends who have mental illness, because we can take our game faces off and be ourselves and share if we've got difficulties or triumphs or whatever it is, or just really dark jokes, things that would horrify neuronormal people. So anyway, that would be it. If you're neuronormal and you have a friend who's depressed and having thoughts of suicide, just listen. And if you are suicidal, call the hotline. If you're just having a really bad day, call a crazy person and
it's interesting, the parallels here, because when I get asked that question, should I just confront my friend and help them come out? My answer is no. You should just let them be who they are. You can be subtle in how you support. Like you could, of course, when I first started speaking, it was, back in the day when, Ellen was like, really becoming big and all this sort of stuff. And, I would say, oh yeah, did you see that episode of such and such where it had the 2 gay characters? It was so good. Or Will and Grace, did you see? It's kind of like, say the things that says, hey, I'm supportive, without, bitch, I know you're gay, come out of the closet. You don't want to do that. And secondly, if you're really struggling with this, call the Trevor hotline or call the LGBTQ coming out hotline.
Yeah.
It's like we have such similar paths. And I think what I've drawn from this is, again, all of us have closets, and the closets may be slightly different, but we're all going through the same stuff, just different pathways. And there are very, very, very similar systems of support that we can all do if we just give each other the blessing and the guidance to be human to one another. And I think that's really shared.
One last note, because people who go through conversion, quote, therapy, end quote, have a much higher suicide rate.
Yes, absolutely.
So, if you have a gay friend, don't recommend. Hey, listen, you can pray the gay away. Yeah.
Just like I can pray the fat away. So there we go. But,
well, you're in the gym. That you can do something about.
Yeah, exactly. Get in the gym. That's how you get the fat off if you're not eating while you're on the treadmill. So anyway, well, Frank, I enjoyed this conversation, my friend. Let's give a shout out again. The book is
Guts, Grit, and the Grind, a men's mental fitness manual.
And your podcast is?
Podcast is the Suicide Prevention Punchline.
Nice. Love it. Love it. Love it. And if you all want to connect with Frank, there will be tons of stuff on the show page. We'll have a link over to the book. We will have links to the podcast. And really, seriously, if you need some help, call the hotlines. They are your best friend when you don't think you have a best friend. So thanks again for being here, Frank. So appreciate you, buddy.
My pleasure. From the closet.
Yeah, exactly. From my closet to your closet. We're calling this one a wrap. So thanks.
Yeah, and I've been inspired, Rick. As soon as we get done talking, I'm getting out of the closet.
There you go. That's awesome, bro. Thanks so much. Hey, Life Uncloseted family. Another episode of Life Uncloseted has come to an end, and it is time for all of us to sashay away and go face our fears, make those bold moves, and stand up to living our life without apology. But before you do, I've got a favor to ask of you. Would you hop over to iTunes or Spotify or Podbean or wherever it is that you're listening to this and just give us a little bit of love if you like what we're doing here at Life Uncloseted. Here's what it does. It helps other people find the show. It helps other people get to know what we're all about. And you just might help change a life. In fact, if you really want to change a life, we'd love it if you just ask a friend to take a listen and see what they think. So that's it. Love you all deeply. I'm Rick Clemens, the host of Life Uncloseted, and never stop stepping out, stepping up, and stepping into living your life uncloseted.